When you think of Satan, what image comes to mind? For most of us, raised in the modern Christian tradition, the picture is clear and terrifying. He is the great adversary, the fallen archangel, the tempter in the garden, the prince of darkness, a cosmic rebel locked in an eternal struggle against God. This is the Satan of the New Testament, a clearly defined antagonist, a central figure in the drama of salvation. But you need to understand this. That sharply focused portrait is almost entirely absent from the pages of the Old Testament. The truth is, if you were an ancient Israelite reading only the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, your understanding of Satan would be drastically different. It would be vague, undefined, and almost peripheral. Think about it. The word Satan itself in Hebrew, Ha-Satan, is not always a proper name. It's a title. It means the accuser or the adversary. It describes a role, often one played by a heavenly being in God's divine counsel, an angelic prosecutor whose job it is to test the righteousness of humanity. In the Book of Job, he appears before God and needs divine permission to act. In Zechariah, he stands as an accuser against the high priest. And most shockingly, in the foundational story of humanity's fall in the Book of Genesis, he is completely absent. We see a serpent, a cunning beast of the field. But the name Satan is never mentioned. The explicit link between that serpent and a cosmic entity of evil is a connection made much later, primarily in the New Testament. The Old Testament leaves us with a profound mystery. Who is this adversary? Where did he come from? What is his true nature and scope of power? The canonical text is eerily silent on the details. This silence has led to centuries of speculation. But what if the silence wasn't because the answers didn't exist? What if the silence was because the text that held the answers was deliberately set aside? What if there was another ancient Hebrew text, a text known to the Essenes at Qumran and preserved by the early church, that paints a detailed, chilling, and systematic portrait of the enemy? A text that gives him a name, an origin, and a terrifying, God-permitted role in the unfolding of history. That text is the Book of Jubilees, and the name it gives him is not Satan, it is Mastema. So, who is Mastema? The name itself is a crucial clue, a key that begins to unlock the entire mystery. It derives from the Hebrew root shatam, which means to be hostile, to bear a grudge, or to persecute. It is closely related to the same root word for Satan, the accuser. But in the Book of Jubilees, this is no longer just a title. It is a proper name. It is the name of a specific entity, a being with a rank and a terrifying purpose. Jubilees doesn't just call him Mastema. It gives him a title, Prince Mastema. This is the critical difference. While the Old Testament gives us glimpses of an accuser, Jubilees presents us with a fully formed antagonist. He is not a vague force of opposition. He is the intelligent, cunning, and malevolent chief of the evil spirits. He is a character who walks onto the stage of history with a clear agenda, a defined hierarchy, and most disturbingly, a legal standing in the court of heaven. And here is the most shocking part of the introduction. The Book of Jubilees doesn't present Mastema as a rogue agent, a rebel who has been cast out and operates in the shadows. Instead, it depicts him as a figure who, while evil, still operates within the bounds of God's sovereign permission. He is a tool of judgment, a minister of disaster, a necessary force of opposition allowed by God to test humanity and punish wickedness. He is not fighting a war against God that he might win. He is playing a role in God's cosmic plan that he is destined to fulfill. What if I told you that it was Prince Mastema who came before God and instigated the test of Abraham's faith on Mount Moriah? What if I told you that it was Mastema who was given authority to aid the Egyptian magicians against Moses? What if I told you that the very existence of demons on earth after the flood was the result of a direct negotiation, a horrifying bargain struck between God and this dark prince? This is not speculation. This is what is written. The Book of Jubilees lifts the veil on the adversary, moving him from the shadowy periphery of the Old Testament to the chilling center of the spiritual conflict on earth. To understand Mastema is to understand a far more complex and terrifying doctrine of evil than many of us have ever been exposed to. Our investigation begins now as we open the case file on the Prince of Hostility himself. To understand any enemy, you must first understand their origin story. The New Testament tradition, heavily influenced by later interpretations, often identifies Satan as a fallen archangel, a being like Lucifer who was cast out of heaven for his pride. But the Book of Jubilees presents a different and in some ways far more disturbing genealogy for the evil spirits that plague humanity. Their origin is not heavenly, but terrestrial. It is born from an unholy union of heaven and earth. Our investigation takes us back to the days before the Great Flood, a time of profound corruption described in Genesis chapter 6. This is the era of the sons of God and the daughters of men. While Genesis is brief, Jubilees, along with the Book of Enoch, provides a detailed and horrifying account. The sons of God were angels, a specific class known as the Watchers, who were sent to earth to instruct humanity, but they abandoned their post. They lusted after human women, bound themselves by an oath, and descended to commit the ultimate transgression. From this unholy union, a monstrous offspring was born, the Nephilim, the giants. These were not simply large humans, they were violent, bloodthirsty hybrids, beings of immense power and insatiable appetites who filled the earth with violence, injustice, and cannibalism. It was their corruption, born from the sin of the Watchers, that was the primary cause for God's judgment of the flood. Now, here is the critical link. The flood came and wiped the earth clean. The bodies of the wicked humans and the giant Nephilim were destroyed. But what about their spirits? The Book of Jubilees makes a chilling clarification. While the fallen Watchers were bound and imprisoned deep within the earth to await their final judgment, the spirits that emerged from the dead bodies of their giant offspring were not. These disembodied spirits, born of a spiritual father and a physical mother, were destined to remain on earth. They became the demons, the evil wandering spirits whose entire purpose is to torment, deceive, and lead humanity astray. And who is their leader? Who is the chief, the prince, the commander of this legion of earthbound malevolent spirits? The Book of Jubilees is explicit. It is Prince Mastema. He is not a fallen angel from the original heavenly rebellion. He is the chief of the spirits born from the sin of the Nephilim. His origin is intrinsically tied to the corruption of the earth, and his domain is the earth. This is a critical distinction. It means his focus, his hatred, and his entire reason for being are directed squarely at one target, the human race. The story of Mastema's rise to power is not a story of rebellion, but of negotiation. It is not a coup, it is a court settlement. And the terms of this settlement are perhaps the most chilling revelation in the entire Book of Jubilees. The scene is set just after the Great Flood. Noah and his family have emerged from the ark. The earth has been cleansed. The physical bodies of the Nephilim have been destroyed. And now, the disembodied spirits of those giants, the demons, begin to torment and lead Noah's grandchildren astray. Faced with this new plague, Noah offers a desperate prayer to God, pleading for these evil spirits to be imprisoned, to be locked away just as their angelic fathers, the Watchers, had been. And at first, God agrees. In Jubilees chapter 10, God commands his angels to bind all of them. The end of demonic influence on earth seems imminent. The world is about to have a true, fresh start. But then, an intervention happens. Just as the angels are about to complete their task, a figure steps forward out of the spiritual shadows to make his appeal before the throne of God. It is their leader, Prince Mastema, and what he says is a masterclass in malevolent legalism. He does not deny his evil nature. He does not plead for mercy. Instead, he makes a calculated, strategic argument. He says to God, "Lord, Creator, let some of them remain before me, and let them listen to my voice, and do all that I shall tell them. For if some of them are not left to me, I shall not be able to execute the power of my will on the sons of men. For these are for corruption, leading astray and destroying." You need to understand the gravity of what is happening here. Mastema is arguing that his purpose to corrupt, to tempt, to be an instrument of judgment is a necessary part of God's plan. He is essentially petitioning for the legal right to continue his evil work. And here is the most terrifying part of the story. God grants his request. The text is explicit. God commands the angels to bind 9/10 of the evil spirits and cast them into the place of condemnation. But the remaining 1/10 he allows to remain on earth under the direct command of Prince Mastema. This is not a defeat for God. It is a sovereign decree. God, for his own purposes, allows evil to have a continuing, authorized presence in the world. Mastema is not a squatter on God's earth. He is a tenant with a lease. He has been given a legal mandate to test, to accuse, and to afflict humanity. Every act of demonic oppression, every temptation, every wicked thought whispered into the heart of man, according to Jubilees, happens as a result of this terrifying, divinely permitted bargain. This is the foundation of Mastema's power. It is not stolen, it was granted. With his legal standing secured by a divine decree, Prince Mastema does not remain a passive observer of history. The Book of Jubilees paints him as a proactive and relentless agent of hostility, intervening at key moments to test the righteous and accelerate the downfall of the wicked. His fingerprints are all over the foundational stories of Israel. Let's examine the official record, the case file of his accomplishments as documented in the heavenly tablets. The first major intervention comes during the life of Abraham. It is the single greatest test of faith in the Old Testament, the binding of Isaac. While Genesis chapter 22 simply states that God tested Abraham, Jubilees provides the chilling backstory. In chapter 17, it reveals that the test was instigated by none other than Prince Mastema. He came before God, just as how Satan did in the story of Job, and accused Abraham, claiming his love for his son Isaac surpassed his love for God. He challenged God, "Command him to offer him up as a burnt offering on the altar, and you will see if he will do this command." The command that came to Abraham, therefore, was a direct result of Mastema's accusation. The purpose was to prove Mastema wrong and shame him. Centuries later, when God calls Moses to deliver Israel from bondage, Mastema appears again as a key antagonist. In Jubilees chapter 48, when Moses is performing signs and wonders before Pharaoh, the text reveals that it was Prince Mastema who was permitted to help the Egyptian sorcerers, Jan and Jambres. He empowered them to replicate some of Moses' miracles, hardening Pharaoh's heart and prolonging the suffering of Israel. His goal was to create a contest, to challenge the power of God, and to keep the chosen people in chains. The narrative continues. Jubilees also attributes the hardening of Pharaoh's heart directly to Mastema's influence, portraying him as the spiritual force behind the king's stubbornness. And in a strange and often misunderstood event from the Book of Exodus, where the Lord seeks to kill Moses at an inn, Jubilees chapter 48 again clarifies that it was Prince Mastema who attempted to kill Moses, only to be thwarted when Zipporah circumcised their son. Finally, at the climactic moment of the Exodus, as the Israelites stand trapped between the Red Sea and the approaching Egyptian army, Mastema plays his final desperate card. While God was binding the evil spirits to prevent them from accusing Israel, Jubilees 48 states that Prince Mastema alone was left to aid the Egyptians in their pursuit. He was the spiritual force driving the chariots forward, eager to see Israel destroyed. It was only after God unleashed his power to save his people that Mastema was finally and utterly defeated. From Abraham to Moses, the pattern is clear. Mastema is not a distant figure. He is a hands-on adversary, a master strategist, always present at the critical junctures of redemptive history, working tirelessly to subvert God's plan and destroy God's people. To truly grasp the unique identity of Mastema, we must place him side by side with the most detailed portrait of the adversary that the canonical Old Testament provides, the figure of Satan in the opening chapters of the Book of Job. On the surface, the parallels are striking and undeniable. Both accounts present us with a scene in the divine council, a heavenly court where spiritual beings present themselves before God. In Job, Satan, the accuser, comes among the sons of God. He is not depicted as a rebel who has broken in, but as a recognized member of the council with a specific function. His role is to roam the earth and report back, to act as a celestial prosecutor, testing the integrity of humanity. He challenges God regarding Job's righteousness, claiming it is merely a product of God's blessings. He then requires and receives divine permission to afflict Job with strict limitations. God sets the boundaries, and the accuser must operate within them. Now, look at the scene in Jubilees chapter 17 with the testing of Abraham. The setup is nearly identical. Prince Mastema comes before God among the heavenly beings and presents his case. He accuses Abraham of a divided heart. He challenges God to put Abraham to the ultimate test, and he only receives the authority to proceed after God gives the command. The structural parallel is perfect. Both Mastema and Satan are figures who operate within the divine council and function as accusers who test the faithful. However, the differences, while subtle, are profound and reveal a significant evolution in the understanding of evil. The accuser in Job, Satan, is presented almost as an impartial functionary, a cynical but necessary part of the heavenly administration. His motivations seem rooted in his role, not in a personal, deep-seated hatred for humanity. Mastema, on the other hand, is portrayed with a far more personal and venomous malice. He is not just the accuser. He is Prince Mastema, the leader of a demonic host whose entire origin is rooted in the corruption of humanity. His desire to see Abraham fail feels less like a legal test and more like a personal vendetta. The Book of Job leaves the reader wondering about the accuser's ultimate nature. The Book of Jubilees leaves no doubt. Mastema is not just playing a role, he is fundamentally and irredeemably evil. He is the embodiment of hostility, and his accusations are fueled by an ancient hatred for the children of Adam. The courtroom may be the same, but the prosecutor in Jubilees is far more dangerous. The very name Mastema is a key that unlocks the complexity of his character. As we've established, it comes from a Hebrew root meaning hostility or enmity, which firmly places him in the role of the adversary. But the nuance goes deeper. In ancient Hebrew thought, this concept of hostility wasn't just chaotic rage. It could also carry a legal or judicial sense. It was the hostility of a prosecuting attorney towards a defendant in court. This is why Mastema's role is far more complex than the simple devil figure of later tradition. He wears two masks, and you need to see both to understand his true function. On one hand, he is the heavenly prosecutor. In this role, he operates under the direct, albeit permissive, authority of God. Like Satan in the Book of Job, his function is to expose sin, to challenge false righteousness, and to test the faith of the elect. When he comes before God to accuse Abraham, he is acting in this capacity. He is a necessary, albeit malevolent, part of the divine judicial system. He ensures that faith is not cheap, that righteousness is proven through fire. In this sense, he is a tool, a dark instrument used by a sovereign God to achieve a righteous end, the demonstration of true faith. But on the other hand, he is the earthly destroyer. This is the face he shows the world. As the prince of the demonic spirits born from the Nephilim, his inherent nature is one of destruction, corruption, and death. His will, as he himself stated in the great bargain after the flood, is to lead mankind astray. When he hardens Pharaoh's heart, when he empowers the Egyptian sorcerers, when he drives the Egyptian army towards the Red Sea, he is not testing faith. He is actively seeking to destroy God's chosen people. This is the terrifying duality of Mastema. He is a servant of God's sovereign court, and at the same time, a master of his own demonic kingdom. He prosecutes the saints with divine permission and persecutes the world with demonic passion. He is both an instrument of divine judgment and a source of inherent evil. This makes him a far more intricate and unpredictable figure than the Satan of the New Testament. The New Testament Satan is presented as the god of this world, a rebel in clear opposition to the kingdom of God. The lines are drawn, but Mastema operates in a grayer, more unsettling space. He is an enemy who sometimes carries out the orders of the very king he opposes. He is the prosecutor who also happens to be the leader of the cosmic mafia. This complexity is what makes him so uniquely dangerous, because when he acts, it is often difficult to discern where the permissive will of God ends and his own malevolent will begins. So why does this matter? Why would the author of Jubilees feel the need to develop such a complex and detailed character for the adversary? The answer lies in one of the oldest and most difficult questions in all of theology: the problem of evil. The question is simple, yet has tormented believers for millennia. If God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and perfectly good, why does evil exist? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why does suffering seem to reign in a world created by a benevolent God? The canonical Old Testament, particularly the earlier books, often attributes both blessing and disaster directly to the hand of God. In Isaiah 45:7, God declares, "I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things." This is a powerful declaration of absolute sovereignty. But for later generations grappling with immense suffering and the concept of a perfectly just God, it created a theological tension. How could a perfectly good God be the direct author of disaster and calamity? The Book of Jubilees, written in such a period of crisis, offers a sophisticated solution. It introduces a figure like Prince Mastema to act as a crucial intermediary. By creating Mastema, the author can uphold two truths simultaneously without contradiction. First, God remains absolutely sovereign and in control of all things. Second, God is not the direct, immediate author of evil and temptation. Mastema becomes the agent of affliction. He is the one who brings the plagues, who tempts the righteous, who hardens the hearts of the wicked. But, and this is the critical part, he can only do so with the permission of God. God doesn't author the evil act, but he allows it to happen as part of his greater sovereign plan of testing, judgment, and redemption. Mastema becomes the answer to the question, why did God test Abraham with such a terrible command? In Jubilees, God didn't invent the test, he permitted it in response to Mastema's accusation. Mastema is the source of the malevolent idea, while God remains the sovereign judge who uses it for a righteous purpose. In essence, Mastema functions as a theological buffer. He absorbs the direct responsibility for the evil acts within history, allowing God to remain pure and just while still affirming his ultimate control over all of history. He is the dark minister who carries out the grim work of the kingdom, the necessary evil in a world under judgment. The development of this character was not just a literary choice, it was a profound theological necessity for an author trying to make sense of a broken world while holding on to the belief in a good and all-powerful God. After journeying back 2,000 years to excavate the profile of this ancient adversary, we must return to the present and ask the most important question of all. What does this mean for us today? Is Mastema merely a fascinating relic of ancient Jewish literature, or does his portrait reveal something eternally true about the nature of the enemy we face in our own spiritual lives? The modern church, especially in the West, often portrays the spiritual battle in one of two incomplete ways. Either it focuses almost exclusively on our own internal struggles, our sinful nature, our fleshly desires, or it swings to the other extreme, seeing a demon behind every bush, a chaotic force of evil acting randomly in the world. The portrait of Mastema challenges both of these views. It teaches us, first and foremost, that our enemy is not just a vague concept or our own inner weakness. He is a specific, intelligent, and strategic entity. Prince Mastema is a methodical commander, a legal expert, and a master psychologist. He doesn't just tempt with blatant sin. He accuses, he negotiates, he uses legalism, and he exploits our deepest loves and fears, just as he did with Abraham. To understand this is to recognize that the spiritual battle is not just a fight against temptation. It is a battle of wits, a battle of legal standing, a battle against a thinking enemy. Second, and perhaps more critically, the portrait of Mastema forces us to grapple with the unsettling truth of permitted authority. The evil that assails us does not operate in a vacuum. The trials, the accusations, the hardships that feel like they come directly from the hand of the enemy are often, like the test of Job and Abraham, permitted by God for a higher purpose. How does this change the way we fight? It means our first response in the face of an attack should not be panic, but prayer. Not a prayer of fear, but a prayer of appeal to a higher court. When Mastema comes to accuse, we do not argue with him. We appeal to the judge. We remind ourselves and the accuser of the blood of Jesus Christ that cleanses us from all sin, removing any legal ground for accusation. It means understanding that the enemy who is attacking you is on a leash, and the one holding the leash is our sovereign, loving, and all-powerful God. This doesn't make the battle less real, but it frames it within the ultimate victory and control of God. The portrait of Prince Mastema is undeniably terrifying. He is intelligent, relentless, and empowered by a divine decree. Yet, hidden within this dark doctrine is one of the most powerful and comforting truths for any believer: the absolute, unshakable sovereignty of God. Think about the implications. Even this formidable prince of hostility, this chief of all evil spirits, is not a co-equal power. He is not a rival god engaged in an uncertain cosmic chess match with the Almighty. The Book of Jubilees makes it emphatically clear: Mastema is a creature, he is a subordinate, he must present himself before God, he must make requests, he must receive permission. He operates within boundaries that he did not set and cannot break. This is a profound truth. It means that there is no such thing as a rogue demon. There is no maverick act of evil that takes God by surprise. The enemy's power, as real and destructive as it is a derived power. It is a permitted power. The 1/10 of spirits that Mastema was allowed to keep was a fraction determined not by his strength, but by God's decree. The test of Abraham was not initiated by Mastema's authority, but by his appeal to a higher authority. What does this mean for us? It means that when we face trials, when we are buffeted by temptations, when we feel the hostility of the enemy pressing in on all sides, we can know with absolute certainty that these things have not escaped the notice of our God. They have passed through his sovereign filter. The enemy may intend them for our destruction, but God, in his infinite wisdom, has permitted them for our ultimate good, to refine our faith, to build our endurance, to teach us to rely on him alone, and to ultimately bring him glory. This is the great paradox and the great comfort of the spiritual life. The very existence of a figure like Mastema, who seems to embody the problem of evil, ultimately points to its solution: a God so powerful, so sovereign, that he can take the very worst that the enemy can devise and weave it into the beautiful tapestry of his redemptive plan. The enemy may be the prince of hostility, but he is still just a prince. Our God is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and his throne is never ever for one moment in jeopardy. Understanding the profile of our enemy is not an academic exercise. It is a matter of spiritual survival. The Apostle Paul, in 2 Corinthians 2:11, gives us a stark warning. He urges us to forgive one another, in order that Satan might not outwit us. For we are not unaware of his schemes. We are not to be ignorant of his methods. And the portrait of Prince Mastema in the Book of Jubilees serves as a powerful field manual, exposing the strategies of an ancient enemy. This knowledge demands a response from us. It is a call to leave behind a passive, defensive, and naive version of Christianity, and to adopt a posture of active, intelligent, and sober-minded vigilance. What does this vigilance look like? First, it means taking spiritual protection seriously. The Apostle Peter warns us to be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Mastema is not a roaring lion of chaotic rage. He is a cunning legalist who looks for loopholes, accusations, and unforgiveness. This means we must be diligent to put on the full armor of God described in Ephesians chapter 6, not as a metaphor, but as a daily, practical necessity. We must guard our hearts against bitterness, our minds against deception, and our lives against the unconfessed sin that gives the accuser a legal foothold. Second, it is a call to understand the power of our position in Christ. Mastema's primary weapon is accusation. Our primary defense is the finished work of the cross. Revelation 12:11 declares how the saints overcome the accuser, by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Our testimony is not about our own righteousness, which will always fail under scrutiny. Our testimony is about the righteousness of Jesus Christ that has been credited to our account. We do not engage the prosecutor in a debate. We point him to our advocate, Jesus Christ, the righteous. Finally, this knowledge is a call to abandon fear. Yes, the enemy is real. Yes, his schemes are cunning, but the portrait of Mastema in the end reveals his ultimate limitation. He is a subordinate, he is on a leash, and the victory has already been won. Our vigilance is not the desperate struggle of a losing army. It is the confident watchfulness of a victorious one, guarding the territory that has already been secured by our King. We do not fight for victory. We fight from victory, and that changes everything. Our investigation into the case file of Prince Mastema is now complete. We began with the shadowy, almost incomplete portrait of the adversary in the canonical Old Testament and journeyed into the detailed, systematic, and chilling account found within the pages of the Book of Jubilees. We have uncovered his origin, born from the spirits of the dead Nephilim. We have witnessed his terrifying legal bargain with God, securing the right to maintain a demonic presence on earth. We have chronicled his relentless interventions in the history of God's people. We have seen that he is a complex figure, both a prosecuting attorney in the divine council and a malevolent destroyer on earth. His existence serves as a profound ancient answer to the problem of evil, allowing God to remain both perfectly good and absolutely sovereign. Most importantly, we have seen that the study of this ancient figure is not a deviation from our faith, but a deep enhancement of it, equipping us with a more sophisticated understanding of the spiritual battle we are all engaged in. This is why we do what we do on this channel. The truth is not always simple, and it is not always found on the surface. There are layers of history, language, and theology that have been buried, sometimes by accident and sometimes by design. The study of ancient texts, like the Book of Jubilees, does not weaken the authority of the Bible. On the contrary, it illuminates it. It provides the historical and theological context that the original authors and audiences understood implicitly. It restores a richness and a depth to the biblical narrative that has often been lost through centuries of tradition and simplification. The portrait of Mastema is a powerful reminder that our enemy is real, intelligent, and operating under a set of rules we must understand. But it is also a thunderous declaration of the even greater reality, the absolute and total sovereignty of our God, who is never surprised, never outmaneuvered, and who has already determined the end from the beginning. We do not study the darkness for its own sake. We study the darkness to more fully appreciate the unconquerable brilliance of the light.